Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
With me today is life coach and LOA teacher Joel Elston.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. It's funny, as the intro was playing, I was thinking about the lead up you and I had to the conversation, and Jen came up with the idea that we should talk about assumptions today. And I thought, that actually fits with what we're about to talk about. So without even intending to, we're actually going to do Jen's topic, which is pretty cool.
I actually posted that on Instagram today. So that's
Did you?
She grabbed it.
All right. Well, I wouldn't be surprised, but yes.
Yeah, we followed I followed Ella. I found it. So she might have saw that. So that's good.
I like that. Really, really good. Well, we should probably clue people. We probably should not assume that people know exactly what we're talking about.
Exactly. Assumptions are not good.
They really aren't. No.
And the point of my post with assumptions and is at least from my perspective, assumptions and lack of communication is really the destruction of every relationship I know that people get into. That's where it happens. Assuming and not communicating about those assumptions is, and I don't want to say all of them, but a large percentage of relationships fall apart over that.
I'll go the distance. I'll say all of them.
Yes.
I think it's actually fairly safe.
Yes, I've and just especially how you can develop assumptions about what's going on, what the other person's thinking. I love this topic because it's so relevant. It's what I did. Most of my day-to-day was spent on people who were assuming what other people were thinking. A lot of these were breakups and, well, I wonder what she's thinking right now. And I go, well, it's impossible to know. Well, she must be thinking this or must be thinking that. It's like, or not.
I mean, that's the amazing part, right? We assume that we know what the other person, and we're usually wrong.
Right.
That's the part that is mind blowing.
Well, and for me, I don't have those. I'm not usually getting those kind of assumptions, but the mind it fills in the blanks when it doesn't know something. It fills in the blanks with previous information, or if somebody is, you hear a loud boom somewhere, and I don't know if you have this. Do you have Ring camera?
No. Okay.
So Ring camera has this neighborhood where it's a community where they report things constantly. It's
I see. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So every single night, and then multiple times on weekends, people will write, "Were those gunshots?" And the other thing is, my water pressure is low. Is anyone else experiencing that? Or there's always these things. So of course, I have to. And it's all anonymous.
Sure.
So I respond with, "Yes, those were gunshots. You should probably boil your water."
This is how Joel gets his ha-has. I love it.
Yeah. So I do that. Does anybody? And one time I wrote, "Yes, they were shooting at me. It was horrible." So. Yeah, but the point is, what it most often is, particularly on the weekends, while it is more, these kids that have these high-powered cars. I live in an affluent area, so a lot of these kids have really nice cars.
Yeah,
and they're backfiring. They're loud mufflers. So, but of course, the assumption is to some retired person sitting in their house going, "Oh my God, that's multiple gunshots."
Yeah, understandable. I get it. Yeah,
yeah.
But it does go to point to the challenge, the difficulty associated with making assumptions. Well, and it's not just limited to relationships either.
No, assumptions in general. I mean, we all make assumptions on outcomes. We make assumptions on, employers. The idea that we use historical information to make assumptions that, and most of the time they're going to be benign and don't really matter. But sometimes they can really be blocking. And the idea that, well, I have this friend that was applying for a job. He's a doctor, and he really wanted a specific job, and he's never had to apply for a job before. So he applied. He had a great interview, very high-paying job, and he didn't hear for a few days.
Oh,
and he was very, very disappointed. So I guess they went with somebody else. And so I did the magic. I'm a smart ass, so I did this like, let me see if I can. Nope, nothing. I don't get anything. So maybe we should call them. And so he He said, no, I don't want to do that. So just call him. Just say, look, I appreciated the interview the other day. I got other opportunities I might be looking at. I'm not trying to pressure you, but if if you have made a decision and it's not me, let me know. I need to be looking. And the guy said, no, 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 no. We are putting together an offer. You're going to be offered the job. But he
Nah.
had in his mind, he hadn't heard back, and he was willing to just walk away from that.
Yeah. Yeah. It shows a few things. First of all, it shows how far off we can be in our assumptions.
Yes.
I mean, literally, it's 180 degrees. That's about as far away from accurate as you can get. And the other thing it can show is, or the other thing it does show is that we can set ourselves off doing stuff that's against our own best interest because of the assumptions that we made that were wrong.
Absolutely.
I mean,
Yeah.
That's kind of scary when you think about it.
Well, I mean, I don't know how many times, and I've done this for so long, but when people are assuming in relationships, or this, well, she didn't text me back, or I didn't text her back, and ask the damn question. Just the assumptions are killing you, and the answer can't be any. Even if it's the worst possible answer, at least there's a solution to that.
Mm-hmm.
And like you're saying, most of the time it's never the worst possible explanation, but we fill in the blanks with assumptions, which are almost always by default the worst possible outcome in what we're assuming.
And we should also point out quite accurately that assumptions aren't always wrong either. I mean, we do occasionally get them right. I mean, I could think of an example where there's a gentleman online who a bunch of us are trying to help. He's got this fixation about women. He can't think of women other than in terms of sex, and we're trying to get him to think about them as human beings, and it's really tough for him. But it's one of those things you don't really want to assume it right off the bat. In our case, we've had dozens and dozens and dozens of posts and comments from this guy that keep reinforcing the same thing. So after a while, the assumption becomes kind of safe. You can kind of go with that one. But even there, I mean, even with that one, I was reluctant to be direct about this is what's going on, because, oh God, what if my assumption is wrong? Because the experience most often is that it's wrong, because we think we know what's going on in somebody else's head. And then we find out, well, we really didn't. And then we find that there's one time that we did have something on the same wavelength as them. We say, oh, we're on the same wavelength with this person. Then we assume that we always are, and we're not.
Absolutely. And that's the cycle of assuming. And then, when assumptions are made, the way to, first of all, if you can't stop assuming, and I've never really thought about it, you might not be able to. I mean, it's like brain automatically does a lot of work there.
Oh, it does, yeah.
But the antidote to wrong assumptions is immediate communication. And that's where most people get stuck, because their assumption has them stuck. So the guy that writes about that, I don't know what's up with her. She hasn't responded to my last text. I said, have you asked her?
Yeah.
No. Well, she always responds, and I know she read it. And I said, okay, all that's good. I said, but you're making an assumption based on your personal beliefs, historical information about being dumb. So if she is in the process of moving on from you, let's get that ball rolling, and let's try to encourage communication. She might not want to be hurting your feelings, or there might be something else. And so the answer came. So he texted her and says, I don't know if I've done something to upset you, but we haven't heard from you. I'm checking. Is everything okay? Do we need to talk? And she goes, I thought I told you I'm in Minnesota with my mom. She's having surgery.
Assumptions in both directions in that case.
Yeah. So turns out she never sent the message. He never got the message, so started assuming she was, and it's just this, and it's like simple communication. Or even if it is something like, I have years ago I was dating this woman, and it was just very casual. We were friends. We agreed it wasn't anything serious. This is many years ago. And one of the concepts, when we had great communication, and I said, look, we weren't really compatible, other than, just the stuff we're at, but we didn't really I didn't want to get married. That was the key. That's like, hell no. Yeah. And so she was aware of that, and she was good with it. And then, so she met a guy, and she said, look, remember we talked about this? I said, absolutely. I mean, we had the most healthy, quote unquote, separation because
Wow.
we just discussed it, but we knew there was no commitment, but there
Yeah.
was never a moment of hard feelings. We're very good friends today, and she's married to that guy. I'm good friends with him.
Wow. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it shows the power of that communication that you're talking about.
Now that's not every relationship, Walt, but that's that one. That one
Well,
was
I mean,
good.
the exception proves the rule.
Exactly. Yeah. The rest of them, they're not going to be really talked about here. But
Okay. Yeah. Well,
yeah,
we won't delve too deeply into that.
yeah,
I totally get and understand that. This is bringing to mind one of those memes that flies around on social media that I saw recently. A couple, a young man, young woman in bed, but they're lying away from each other. And there's a little cartoon balloon over her head that says, "I know it. He's thinking about other women." And there's a little cartoon balloon over his head that says, "What causes the northern lights anyway?"
yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, and that's my son TJ years ago was he was a great looking kid, had a lot of girlfriends over the time, and
Mm.
and TJ was super ADHD. He was always thinking about different things. And so one time he came to me, he says, "Dad, why do girls always want to know what I'm thinking?" And I go, "That's just sort of what they do, buddy." And he goes, "Sometimes I'm not thinking anything." I said, "Well, yeah." He said, "They don't seem to believe me." And I said, "Well," I said, "Well, they're what they're trying to ask, are you thinking about me?"
Yeah.
And he
Mm.
goes, "Why would I do that?" And he was very much the kid that would like there's some like one day I was there with him, and we were in the car, and he had this very puzzled look on his face, and I thought he was about to ask he said, "Can I ask you something, like it's a serious question?" Or I
Mm.
mean, I'm like, "Of course, buddy, you can ask me anything." And so he was contemplating, and he goes, "How far is the furthest star?" I go, I don't know that, but we can find out. I just can't right now." And he goes, "That's been bothering me all day." I said, "Okay." But he thought it was important to ask, and he asked me if he could ask me the question.
And I'm
So
sure that was at the top of the list of items that you had in mind as to what the question likely was going to be.
I was with him. He was very literal, so there is no telling what would come out of his mouth. I can't. Yeah, I mean, he was awesome that way. He didn't lie. He was very literal. He told the truth, no matter
Mm.
what.
Mm.
But he was just also very, he would get, his brain would start working on a problem, and he would just, really, really get into the process. Like,
Mm.
it's, I was, we went to a football game in Charlotte, and the football game was on a phone. We had an early version of Microsoft had a phone a long time ago,
Mm.
but before Apple phones, right?
Right.
And it ate up so much data. It was ridiculous. But
Mhm.
for a second, I was showing him the game on my phone. It was very
Mm.
poor quality, and it was not well made. It kept crashing, but nonetheless, I was showing him the game. And the game that we were watching was on about probably a 7-second delay from what we were seeing live.
Oh, okay.
And the entire game, that's all he focused on. Explaining, well, here's what's happening, the distance, the speed of light, all this. It's going to a satellite, to the phone, and very poor quality. So, but it was just fascinating. But again, his brain was always looking for things, and people could look at him and say, "Man, he's a deep thinker."
Mm.
And he is, but not about the things they're thinking he's thinking.
Yeah.
He's always on a deep track. So when we know somebody really well, or we make assumptions, especially long-term relationship, you're
Mm.
making assumptions, and
Oh,
you're
yeah.
making the assumptions on often previous things that were negative. So this is a generic case, not anybody in particular, but it's a client. She's dated 3 or 4 guys, and each one, the term they use today, they ghosted her.
Mm.
They all of a sudden just cut her off. They quit communicating, wouldn't respond. They didn't say bye. They didn't break up. They just ghosted her.
Right.
So she then started anticipating at a deep level that this person is going to end up ghosting me.
Yeah,
And
and I know how that one works out. That I've been down that road. That is not a fun road to be on.
yeah, and so it makes it so assumptions can make your life miserable,
Oh yeah,
literally.
and undermine your self-confidence, and
Yes,
self-worth. It
yes,
undermines your thought process. It undermines your emotional system. It undermines everything.
yes, yeah.
All
Well,
because of
because it
what
also
we could
gets
call
in.
a toxic emotion, or not a toxic assumption. I mean,
Yeah. Well, it also gets it lights up the central nervous system. It puts you in a fight or
yeah,
flight often.
yeah,
He's about to break up with me. He's not doing this. He's not doing that, or she's not doing this, or somebody at work's talking about me, or years ago. This is a funny thing. I made an assumption, and it was actually true. So right before I left Williamsville Wellness, that's the company I worked at when you and I first spoke.
right.
It was a treatment center, and uh, I had no idea that I was quote unquote targeted to be fired.
Mm,
So they were trying to look for a reason to fire. I didn't know that at the time.
right.
So the wife of the owner is a very wealthy tobacco heiress,
Hmm.
and so when she would call, and back then, if the phone needed answering, I answered it.
Hmm.
So I just picked up the phone one day, said, "This is Joel, Williamsville Wellness," and she said, so historically we would have, I say, "Hey, how are you? Great. How you been? How are the kids? So we had this dialogue. So a few days before it was the end of my employment, obviously he had talked to her about it. So I answered the phone. I said, "Hey, how are you?" Not a word.
Mm,
"I need to speak with Bob, please." Totally different demeanor than we had ever
mm,
had. And it was like, oh. So I had, now I didn't put it together all the way. I go, there's a change in her demeanor toward me,
right. The
knowing
behavior.
how things work. So I knew something on some level was up. You
Right.
know what I mean? And now the assumption ended up being true. And also, I didn't care at that point. Yeah. I was ready
Which
to
is
go
very
anyway.
helpful, by the way. That's a very helpful attitude.
Yes, but I did notice the change in demeanor and perspective from her, and that was it turned out to be a true assumption. And so you'll see that a lot. Sometimes you'll recognize just when people change the way they look, because people won't make eye contact when something's about to happen. uh what one of the friends that I used to uh that it was employed at Israel Wellness, I was gone one day, and there was a whole big shakeup before I left.
Mm.
And so one of my friends was working there. I wasn't there, and he texted me and he said, "They're acting weird today."
Mm.
And I jokingly said, "They're weird every day. Don't worry about it." And he goes, "No, it's like nobody." We used to have this meeting. I wasn't invited to this meeting, and I said, "You're overthinking it. Don't worry about it." Well, while I was gone, they came in and they fired him, and he picked up on that he was not normally included. He knew he was on the way out.
Mm.
And you see that a lot. So you see, especially in unhealthy environments, assumptions are almost necessary, because it was so unstable there. Everybody knew they were going to be fired at some point.
Well, with situations like that, what I found anyway is that you don't just get one clue.
Right.
You get a
Oh yeah.
whole series of clues. They're all basically repeating themselves in a variety of different ways that all point to the same end result, whatever the end result is.
Right.
So after a while, you have to ask yourself, well, is that an assumption, or is that just putting together the pieces?
Yes. Well, and they may be one and the same sometimes. And
Yeah,
not all assumptions, as you sort of pointed out earlier, are unhealthy.
right.
They serve a purpose, because we got to fill in the blanks, as I keep saying.
Hmm.
If you don't have information, you need to, okay, this, and this. So I want to put this piece of information. I'll have to assume this goes right here for right now.
Yeah. And the test is, do the pieces keep filling in?
Yes, absolutely. And so just as we're doing this, one of the things I always like to do is bring remedies to problems. So when you're
Hmm.
assuming and it's creating problems, then you get to the communicating side. The
Yeah.
antidote is communication, and being able to ask the question, also not giving, I think it's sort of cruel when you're in a relationship if you are giving out those, changing your demeanor, changing that. I'm just, and you can imagine, I'm just very much a let's pull the band-aid off guy,
Mm.
let's just, if we're going to do this, let's break up, or let's go. But it doesn't need to be, let's don't get it to a place where, oh my gosh, it gets weird. You haven't seen them for a week or two, and what's going on? I'm busy. So it's just, it's such a, to me, that's what makes it so annoying in relationships.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, and
Yeah.
I'm with you on that. I think it points to why communication is vitally important, not only toward making it easier for a breakup to happen, but also making it easier for a coming together to happen.
A reconciliation or an improvement. The idea that I have this, and this is probably the standard.
Hmm.
So how, and again, I have a sort of a skewed view of all this because of who I work with. So
Mm.
I'm not saying this is how it is, but I don't know how many people I know, they get married, everything's fine. They have 2 kids and life's going on pretty good.
Hmm.
And then randomly, when the older kid is about 12 or 14, is when all of a sudden they get a break, they get a divorce. And and at first I just thought, well, that's just random. But no, it's really specific with that older kid at that age. There's something going on
Well,
in the
there's
change
actually
of,
statistics. There are surveys that show that 15 years is a break point in a large
yeah.
number of marriages.
Well, and that would fit this narrative. I'm not suggesting it's about the kid, but it's just that age of the kid. So assuming they get married, wait a year or so and have a kid, that fits that 15 years
Yeah,
perfectly.
it fits it
And
perfectly.
so, but almost every time they're when you talk to them about the breakup, they quote unquote, they say, well, we're not in love anymore. And we did that. But they quit communicating a long time ago. They quit.
Yeah.
Now they were in the operational part of the marriage. You need to pick up the kid at soccer practice. You need to do this PTA meeting tomorrow. They're communicating in the mundane, but any form of relationship sort of gives way to the functionality of the household.
Mm-hmm.
And so then somebody along the way goes, yeah, I can't, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm not in love with him or her. And it's, and they agree, let's get a divorce. Then ironically, they then quickly go to the gym, get really fit again, because they're going to
That's
be
one of
now
your
looking
favorite
for
things.
yeah. And it's funny because then they're going to meet somebody else who
Yeah,
had the exact same
yeah,
experience, and they're
yeah.
literally just going to change partners
That's right.
with the same scenario, which is hilarious to me.
Well, I understand why you say it's hilarious too,
Yeah.
because it is. It's a
It,
funny thing. I
yeah.
mean, you've made the point many times to me. I'm not sure always on the show. I think mostly off the show, but you've made the point to me many times. They went to the gym to get themselves back in shape. Why didn't they do that while they were still in the relationship?
Well, that's always been amazing to me is, as soon as they get, broken up, they're like, I'm going on a diet. They post all these great pictures. They work, they lose 50 pounds or 40 pounds, wherever they're at. And they look incredible. It's like, have you guys considered doing that during the
Yeah.
thing? But it's also, there's a doctor friend of mine that really believes, and he states this, and this is not my opinion, thank God, because I don't want any heat, but he said humans are not biologically predisposed to stay together for long periods of time.
It's an interesting point.
Yeah, he said when you look at the point, a male can impregnate unlimited women. A woman can have a baby on average a little less than once a year, and it's really intended. The whole reproduction cycle is intended to populate the earth and make the species go forward. The concept of marriage and connection, I believe, was a religious concept at some point, or maybe just functionality as well. But and there's nothing wrong with it. But it's funny because we are according to this guy, biologically predisposed to not be with the same partner over and over.
Yeah, well, lots of things. Here we go again with the word assumption. A lot of
Yeah.
things are assumed by researchers,
Yes.
which I find to be fascinating. They
Yes.
claim, especially social science researchers. I mean, it's also true for more strict physical sciences and so forth. But it's particularly true with the social sciences. it's a major trap that so many PhD people fall into, and that is they assume that something is true, and then they set out to show that it's true with data, rather than trying to find out what's true. I mean, I don't know what happened with the guy that you just described. I don't know if he found that one out or if he assumed it and then found data to support it. But what I do know is that I would say the vast majority, I don't think I'm out of bounds to say that, the vast majority of people in the social sciences do it in the reverse order from the way it would be done if it were truly scientific. There are a few who, you know, they're doing research just to find out what happens, just to explore, just they don't care which way the data is going to go. But I think they're few and far between. And as a result, if now again, I'm making an assumption here based on stuff that I've seen, based on stuff that I've read and so forth. But if my assumption is true, it raises a few questions in my mind. One of the questions that comes to my mind is, I wonder how many of the assumption-based researches that are done have produced false conclusions based on false assumptions.
Oh, it's unlimited, and
it's kind of scary.
What this guy's methodology was, he wasn't doing it in a traditional sort of a social science kind of look. He was doing it biologically. Why would a male be able to produce unlimited children, and the female only be able to do one a year? Just the biological structure of that. That's what he was going by. It's like, so forget emotion, forget rules. The idea that you're spreading your seed across the world to make as many kids as possible. That was the original intent.
And I'm not sure whose intent that was. That's a whole different conversation.
But again, he solely is based on the physicality of it, the science of reproduction.
And yet there's also a lesson in here, though, because something that people, I need to kind of take a step back and describe what science is from my perspective. It's something that I find many people have misconceptions about, and I define my understanding of science based on what's known as the scientific method. And for those who don't remember the scientific method from high school, it's pretty simple. The scientific method is you create a hypothesis, then you do some research, find out if the hypothesis is true, and then you adjust the hypothesis, and you keep doing that over and over again, refining. That's the scientific method.
Sure.
There's a key element in there that people overlook. Now, how much is in there? There's two elements in there. How can you overlook anything? And yet it gets overlooked all the time because we have this belief that science is precise, that science is accurate, that you don't question science, that you don't doubt science. But they forget the hypothesis part. The hypothesis part is a human being putting some ideas together and saying, I think that may be true. In other words, there's no actual hard stuff going on there. It's just the mind kind of creating a possibility and seeing what happens.
Well, you're completely right. And when you introduce quantum physics against traditional physics, you have this. We're not going there, but you understand.
I could hardly wait. I mean, I know how much you love the topic.
Yeah. So quantum physics literally coexists with proof. Both versions exist, and they've been proven true.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing that's also interesting about science, because like I said, the scientific method is you hypothesize, you gather data, you do some more hypothesizing, you gather more data endlessly. There's a step in there that doesn't exist. That's the proof step. Yeah. There's no such thing as proof in science.
Well, here's an example of where proof did get proved. At first, the nuclear fission or creating a nuclear bomb was theory, right?
Yeah.
It was theory. So nobody knew. Even before the bomb, right before they set it off the first test, they're like, it's very unlikely that it will ignite every atom in the world to blow us all up. However, it was one of the possibilities.
It was, yeah.
And when they were able to make it happen, they proved their theory. It worked.
Oh yeah, they were able to demonstrate that it worked, and
Yeah,
science does that often. Science
yeah,
is able to demonstrate that
and
certain things happen. The
yeah.
tricky part, like you were alluding to with quantum mechanics, and that's just actually the most dramatic one, but there are a lot of them, is that even when we think we've got it, we don't got it.
Well, but that's why I've always, like, for example, it is standard science to believe that evolution is the fact.
Yeah,
And if you suggest it's anything other than that, you're automatically deemed wacky.
absolutely. Yeah. hmm
But when you really look at it, it has a lot of evidence saying it is, but there's some big missing pieces as well.
Oh, just a few.
Yeah. And so again, but assumptions are made. And
hmm
then I told you we talked about this a long time ago. So there's a formula to determine, based on your age.
Yes, I love this one.
Yeah. So
Every time you set this one up, I just start to chuckle.
yeah. So there's a guy that he was coming up with a formula to determine the maximum heart rate for a person to achieve during exercise.
Right.
And so he came up with this formula. You start with 220, you minus your age, and then you're reaching for a 90 to 95% max heartbeat. So that is literally in every exercise book, every training. It's science, right? It's there. The guy goes, no. I made all of that up. That the 220 is totally random. And he kept begging people to quit using it because there's nothing to it. It doesn't make any sense. It's random. But when I hear people talk, I've heard doctors say, well, here's how you determine your max heart rate. No. It's just simply a random. He was trying to come up with a standardized formula that sort of made sense, and he reverse engineered it. He figured he's very fit. He got his max heart rate up to what he thought was about, okay, that's it. And so then he came up with a number, and that was 220. That if you subtracted all that, so he built it on his. He said this was just for a general example that turned into. He wrote it in a paper and explained it clearly. This is not science. This is what I did, and it's considered science now.
There are a lot of things like that. The nutrition, that's one of the more fascinating ones for me.
Yes.
You know, the different the basic nutritional model, the fats, proteins, carbohydrates thing, all of that, you know, the food pyramid, all that stuff is considered to be the bedrock for modern understanding of diet and nutrition. And what so many people not directly in the field don't know is that most of it was set by a low-level government employee who was tasked with putting together a pamphlet that explained what the nutritional values of a healthy diet were. And she had no science. She had nothing to back it. Basically, this is what she made for her family every day for their evening meal, and that's the basis for what a healthy diet is.
Sure.
There's no science.
Well, and that's the thing there. But like the food pyramid, for example, and this gets into what if somebody asks me, what is the best nutritional plan? What is that? And I'll be like, everything is bio individual. It is what works for you. What are your goals? If you're going, I'm a power lifter. I lift a lot of weight. I need a lot of protein. If I weren't lifting like I'm lifting, I wouldn't need as much protein. So I eat a diet geared toward what I do. I eat a lot of quality fats. I mean, it's great for the brain. So I have developed what I eat. I try to cut out sugars, particularly added sugars. And those are things that I've used. If I want to help reduce my body fat, I really manipulate the carbs. That's the way I do it. There's other ways. There isn't any one set perfect nutrition, but if you get on Instagram, you have this guy that does this guy that does that. They'll state it as fact, when in reality, like, for example, the food pyramid is just a totally made up thing.
Just completely invented. Yeah.
It doesn't have any. it doesn't have any bearing. It doesn't have any,
Nope.
anything to back it up. I think the best thing people can do is eat real food,
I agree.
non-processed food, just real food. I eat a lot of eggs,
I know
and
you do.
yeah, and I eat, and these are, I'm fortunate. Not everybody can do this, but I buy, from a lady that has eggs.
Oh,
She
okay.
grows
So,
eggs. It's not,
yeah.
they're laid one day and I'm buying them the next day. So I have the
Mm,
freshest pasture raised eggs. There's wild chickens running around, and those, in my mind, have very bright orange yolks. They're very nutritious, and
sure.
I eat a lot of eggs, and it's great. That's what works for me. I eat a lot of meat, but that's, again, I eat quality grass-fed meat. I'm also aware, even if it doesn't affect the nutritional value, I try to find, like, food that is, if it's animal food based on animals, if they're providing food that are not mistreated, that
Mm,
they're, when, local farms, I like, a cow should be able to be a cow, shouldn't be herded in and is stressed and all the other stuff. So again, I'm in a fortunate position to be able to do that. That costs a lot more money, but I try, like, my salmon I get shipped in, it's wild caught salmon.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
The different than the stuff they get in raising farms. So
Right.
that's the stuff I came up with. Real whole food, just real whole food, is sort of the solution for me.
I think it's actually a solution to a lot of things. But there's also a key lesson, if you will, or a milestone, or a key point here that I want to pull out that ties in directly to our topic about assumptions, which is we have to be careful about the assumptions that we make. But let's not fall into the trap of believing that we should never make assumptions, because literally we have to go through our life making assumptions all the time. You
Well,
just listed a whole series of assumptions that I agree with, by the way.
mm,
But there's a whole lot of assumption in there that doesn't, you really don't have tons of data behind it.
you
You have to. There are
you
times you
have
just
to do
have
it,
to
but
have assumptions.
assumptions are, as you're saying, they're necessary. That's how we function. Throughout life, you have to make decisions based on assumptions when you don't have all the information.
That's
It's
right.
required,
Yeah.
and it's, for me, understanding that, and when I look at a situation, if I'm dealing with some kind of crisis with a client, or I am forced to make a lot of assumptions pretty quick. I
Mhm.
have this is an interesting case I had a while back. So I had a new client coming in. He was 26 years old, and I knew he told me he wanted to talk about getting off of his Xanax. He had a dependency
Okay.
on benzodiazepines, Xanax
Okay.
in particular.
Okay.
And so he came into my office the first day, and he was very tired. And he said, "I'm so tired, I quit taking my Xanax yesterday." And I go, "What?" And I said, "You can't do that." And as soon as I said, you can't do that, he went into a seizure, which is what
Wow.
happens when you. So I immediately got him on the ground, called 911 when I did that. I told the ambulance en route that it's a very high chance, and it wouldn't hurt him if I was wrong, that he is in having a seizure from detox or withdrawal from benzos. It could be fatal, and I was keeping him safe. They were there within 4 minutes. There's a doctor next door. Somebody
Wow.
ran and got him, who literally came over. He gave him a shot of benzos,
Okay.
and it's exactly the thing. I made an assumption. I
Yeah.
made an assumption based on that. I had no proof. And the ambulance driver said we couldn't have
Whoops. We just lost your audio. I don't know what happened. No, I mean, like, your audio is gone. Like, I can't hear what you're saying. Your audio is gone. Your audio. There we go.
Yeah. Somebody was calling me, so I thought I had that blocked.
Oh, that's all right. Now, this is one time you're talking, then all of a sudden, boop, there goes the
Yeah.
sound.
I didn't know a call interrupted that.
Well, now you know.
Yeah.
You made an assumption that didn't work out so well.
Exactly. Exactly. So, but that's, you just keep talking. That was my son. I want to make sure nothing's wrong. I'll take the message. So you keep talking.
Yeah, that's all right. Well, I mean, what you're talking about makes a lot of sense, because you're pointing in to the fact that you had to make an assumption under duress, under an emergency situation, it was a reasonable assumption. It was an assumption based on the information that you had available to you at the time. It was the best information that you had, and that information turned out to be correct.
Absolutely.
But you still had to make the assumption. You didn't have a lot of choice about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a good thing you did, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's something when you understand, as you point out, assumptions are absolutely necessary in life. So we're not saying don't make assumptions. We're saying when you make assumptions and communicate with those, in relationship, assuming with lack of communication is the problem.
Yes, very good point. Very good point. And it's not just communication in relationships. Going back to the topic of science, if you make an assumption in science and you don't listen to the data, which is a form of communication, your assumption can come back and bite you in the butt.
Right. Exactly. And that's the problem.
You still have to have the communication. The communication still has to happen. And if the communication isn't happening, then you got yourself a serious problem.
Yeah, completely.
But just by paying attention to, not just in science, not just in relationships, in everything, just by paying attention to the communication that accompanies an assumption, you can essentially eliminate almost all of the risk associated with making an assumption.
Yes. Yes. That's that. And assumption carries risk, and you can mitigate that risk with the communication.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, as I said that, I was thinking to myself, let's see, are there any exceptions? And I'm not thinking of any.
Well, you're assuming there's not.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Yeah.
but yeah, like any topic we discuss, this is the functionality of life. And so I don't ever believe in always. I don't believe in every time, but it's just when I see one group of things that keep happening and breaking things apart is, you like to point it out. So, for our audience members that are assuming their relationship is going bad, or like my husband and I are on the edge of divorce, but we never really talk. Communication, I've heard people say, well, what if it makes it worse? I said, well, you're about to get divorced. So is it?
Yeah, I can speak from personal experience and tell you, I guarantee you the communication is not going to be worse.
Absolutely. Communication.
It's an absolute ironclad guarantee. I can be 100% sure of it.
Yeah. So that's how that works.
Yeah, it's exactly how it works. Yeah.
Yeah.
And by the way, it's not like I didn't try to communicate before the relationship fell apart, because I did try to. But could I have done more? Yeah. Could she have done more? Yeah. In other words, could we have actually carried the communication out to a further extent? Oh, yeah. So it isn't even just a question of trying to do it. You actually have to pull it off.
You have to pull it off. And when you do that, you put yourself, you can salvage things or minimally reduce the damage of what's going to happen if it can't be salvaged.
That's right.
It's there is nothing worse than, and this is not my personal experience, but just watching my clients go through this, there is nothing worse than watching somebody spend weeks upon weeks trying to think what the other person is thinking or doing. Where are they at? Are they dating someone? So had a client a few weeks ago that got broke up with out of nowhere. I mean, madly in love, got broke up with, and they were sharing locations. For 3 years, they've been sharing locations on their phones.
Right.
And so it was, he was putting a lot of stock in, well, she hasn't cut off the sharing yet, so she's probably, we'll be able to talk soon. And then randomly one day he got a notification that she cut that off. And that sent him into a whole nother downfall. It was this, and it was like, if we could have communicated along the way where we're at, but she left the door open enough. She was done. It was clear that she was done. But I think she thought she was going to be kind to him and just let him think there was some hope. And
that's an interesting point right there. Let's stay on that one for a moment, because that is a very common thing. If I don't say something, then I'm being kind to that person.
Yes.
It's often, I think, inaccurately attributed to the women rather than to the men, but I find that the men do it as much or more than the women do. So
Yes.
I don't buy into the whole stereotype on that one.
No, I think it's both sides.
I think so too. But the thing that strikes me about it isn't just that they're trying to be kind. It's that they're trying to get out of the communication.
Well,
They don't want to actually have to deal with it.
They don't want to have to deal with it. They don't want to be the bad guy.
Yeah.
And so they want to. It's it's under the guise of, I don't want to hurt you. I'll let you down gently. Versus, again, I'm the pull the Band-Aid off guy. Like, let's just do it. It might not feel good right now, but a clean cut is so much nicer and quicker and less psychologically damaging.
Totally agree. And in fact, probably the kindest thing that you can do in a situation like that is to communicate rather than not communicate.
Oh,
I mean, because that's the argument, right? The argument is, well, I'm trying to do things the kind way. Well, if you're going to do things the kind way, then communicate, because that's more kind than not communicating.
Well, the when you're honest and you're able to communicate with people you care about, even if it's toward the end of a relationship and that's going to be ending, the kind thing to do is, you don't want them sitting around all day worrying and lack of closure. So if you were to have a breakup and you were to sit down and say, look, this is not working for me anymore. Here's some things that, I need to move on. I want, if you need further discussion or closure, I'll be glad to give that to you, but we're going to break up. If you could do that and then allow maybe a call or two of closure just to get some, that would be the kindest thing you can do. But nobody wants that call or two because they feel so guilty.
Well, is it that they feel guilty, or is it they just don't want to have to handle the negative
or the emotion out, whatever? That I made an assumption too.
Well, we're doing that. That's the whole topic today.
Yeah, they don't want to feel the emotion, whatever that emotion is going to be, whether it was guilt or having to have the conversation.
Right.
Especially when you've been with somebody for a long time and you can't imagine the rest of your life without them. It's it's in a way, you grieve the process. It's like it's the death of a relationship. So their grief is there.
Yeah.
And I always when I walk people through that, I have them go through the 5 stages of grief. Just as a process, and it's geared toward relationships, but understanding that it's something was just removed, taken from you, that it's at a deep level, and it needs to be looked at that way and gently processed.
Something else occurs to me about this topic of assumptions, particularly where relationships are concerned, but it actually applies to almost any area of life, and that is the assumptions we make that get foiled, that turn out to be not what we expected, such as the person who is madly in love and then the relationship ends. That person will have a very strong tendency to either say out loud or think to themselves, but we were perfect for each other. How could they have even done that?
Right.
The assumption was so strong that it had to be true. And that's an indicator of just how strongly, not only do assumptions play a role in our lives, but how strongly we lean on them. How strongly we
do. And in that scenario, you have one person receiving information that everything's fine, we're soulmates, we're here. And there's another person that's so far out of tune with that, they break up.
Yeah.
That gets back to the communication piece, because one person's receiving it, and maybe it's just because their perception, but the other side's not communicating anything different. But it's a great relationship. We're here forever. It's great. And it has this, it defeats your brain when you realize that. And it's like, we were perfect. I don't know how she did that or how he did that. It made no sense. I was, I know several people, but this person that lives in Florida, she's on a big streak here. She's probably watching that. She'll laugh if she hears this, but she meets a guy, and he's the perfect guy. He's everything. He's great. They're fantastic together. They like the same things. They believe the same thing. And then somehow, almost to the day of the 2-year mark, he breaks up with her. This has happened 4 times in a row. Literally.
Wow. 8-year period.
Yeah, the 2-year period. I mean, within a week or two. And I'm like, what goes on? and I'm trying to dissect the puzzle. These are
Yeah.
four different guys.
Yeah.
Well, actually, they're the same guy, but just different names. Literally, she's picking the same guy. So,
There's a
yeah,
clue in here, I can tell.
yeah. She doesn't really buy into that clue that I'm trying to get her to see. It's
Uh-huh.
like they have different names and different faces, but they're the same guy.
Yeah,
And
well, I get that because it's hard often to see in our own relationship choices the commonalities that exist.
yes,
We see a different person every time.
yes,
It takes somebody with that outside perspective to notice the thing that we just kind of gloss over. So I get it. I know where she's coming from on that.
yeah. Well, yeah, and the idea that the same ignoring red flags, assuming, well, that's
Mhm.
not a big deal or whatever. And we have a tendency to make that, a thing, but as we walk through life, the assumption, relationships and stuff, they're going to continue to be there. As we said, they're a necessary part, but the, as we assume and we communicate, that's what we're ultimately shooting for, is improved communication.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean there won't be breakups. It'll mean that the breakups won't feel so incredibly damaging and feel like you just are, because there's nothing like having the rug pulled out from underneath you and your whole
Oh,
life
yeah.
is turned upside down. I remember when you had your breakup, it was like this came out of nowhere.
Yeah, and it didn't come out of nowhere. I mean, it's not like there was no lead up to it. It took me a while
No,
to grasp that fact, but there was lead up
at
to
the
it.
moment, it seemed to come out of nowhere.
At that moment,
Yeah.
exactly. At that moment, it just seemed, and quite honestly, there was another assumption at play there, and it was an assumption based on her and what her past career had been, and that career was as a psychotherapist, which indicated she, by the way, knew about the importance of communication in relationships. So I figured, well, I've been trying to get her to communicate. She'll communicate when she's ready, and that was a false assumption.
Yeah, my theory on us people in counseling and psychologists and all that.
It's well founded, I might add.
Yeah, we didn't get here. We didn't get here just because we went through it ourselves, so we have
Yeah,
our own damage.
yeah,
The vast majority of people in the field that I know of, even the most effective people in the field, have experienced their own stuff and had to come through it. Those are the ones
right.
that learned, and doesn't mean we implement it perfectly. I mean, we're still
No,
humans. Yeah.
no. And in fact, I would say the one strength that therapists tend to have is because they've been through so many of them, they've covered a lot. So they have, a breadth of knowledge to draw upon, personal experience. And I'm saying that with a smile on my face, but it's actually quite important. I mean, well, in your own case, you went through a whole thing when you were younger with a gambling addiction. It paid huge dividends to you when you became a therapist, then later a life coach, just
Yeah.
because people could associate with what you're doing. Like, okay, he gets me.
Well, and I believe my effectiveness has been reinforced with hundreds of clients over the years. The idea that I can relate by what I did, what happened to
Mhm,
me. And
mhm.
one of the reasons I use a life coaching model instead of traditional therapy model, they frown on sharing personal experiences where that's my whole game. As
Yeah,
I
I never
share.
really understood that part, but that's why I never took the course. So I get it. Yeah.
Yeah, yes, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I'm not a big fan of that. But to me, the strength in what I went through, I have a few degrees and certifications.
Just a few.
I have a lot.
Yeah, like 50.
Yeah, but none of them matter compared to my experience, in my opinion. I learned some techniques. I've done some different things, but where it comes, what I went through, what worked for me, what has worked for my thousands of other clients,
Mm,
that's where the value is. It wasn't
yeah.
something I read in a book that says this, that, or the other. It's about, here's tangible proof of what worked for me. And
Mhm.
so for a life coaching me doing life coaching allows a lot more latitude than a traditional therapist would have.
Yeah, well, that's a good reason to be a coach. I think that's why coaching is exploding. I mean, well,
Yes.
now I have my own perspective on it because I do this show and I have hundreds and hundreds of guests on it, and the
Yeah.
vast majority of them have some sort of a coaching thing that they're doing.
Sure.
So I'm exposed to a lot of coaches.
Yes.
But even out in the quote real world, I still encounter a lot of people who do some variation on coaching. They don't always do it as a profession, but it's amazing how often people play a coaching role in life, and I think it's growing. I think it's becoming a bigger thing than it used to be. Because I can remember a time where, you know, I look back on my childhood and so forth, and the adults that I knew, I would have been challenged to come up with maybe 2 or 3 who played coaching roles.
Yes.
Now, I mean, it's hard to find an adult who doesn't play a coaching role. So it's shifted.
One of the things, if I'm coaching let's say someone's in a profession like they want to do better at being a personal trainer. And I work with a lot of personal trainers who want to improve their client list. So what I go to, I'm not going to tell them whatever anybody can show somebody how to lift a weight. That's not even the point. But every personal trainer I know that does well, they're coaches, they're therapists, they listen to the problems, they give positive feedback, they give support, they check on their clients. The woman showing up at the gym that just wants to be able to tell the trainer how she feels, what's going on, it is a form of life coaching as well. So I encourage a lot of personal training to take some life coaching courses to be able to, you know, whether you call yourself a life coach or not, understand it. Hairdressers are another one, bartenders are another. There's people that are out there that are not seemingly into coaching roles that really are. And so and that's based on experience, because it's all about communication. The most effective form of therapy that I use, and I have all the modalities that I can use, but motivational interviewing is the key to everything. It's a way of communicating, asking a lot of questions. And the more you do that, the more vested you get at the client gets vested in you, and their own communication will actually give them the answer of what they need to do.
That makes sense to me. And in fact, as you know, I've been doing this show now for 13 years. I've pretty well developed the skill of asking questions, because that's what you do when you're a host on a show. And it's gotten to the point now where my questioning technique is really all about just bringing the other person out to talk about the stuff going on, which is essentially the same thing that a coach does. So even there, in a sense, I'm doing coaching. I mean, I'm not actively trying to be a coach to these people, but the process is kind of there anyway, just by default.
Well, it is.
It's really everywhere. It's literally in all areas of life now in ways that didn't exist 50 years ago.
Well, and you know, I work with a lot of professional athletes as well, and most professional athletes, particularly of, you know, various races and stuff, they're not open to therapy. They going to see a doctor or a therapist for your psychological problems shows you're weak.
Yeah.
But they love coaching. They've been coached since they've been 6 years old. So they love the idea of coaching.
Right.
And so now I want to tell them we end up the same thing. We talk about the same thing, but coaching to them sounds a lot more positive. And of course, anything I do is going to be toward a positive, you know, I don't use any.
Right.
Yeah. You know, so I'm about strength building, pick up, move forward, reframe, look at your situation and just, you know, what is the next step forward? That's the general thing for everybody.
Which is one of the things I love about you. I also love these conversations. We have so much fun when we do these. I mean, even if we're assuming that we're going to have a topic of conversation, we still end up having a good conversation. So the assumption actually works out well in those cases.
We never have had a bad one. And today, I'm going to give us a 95% success rate of not going down a rabbit hole.
I think you're right. We didn't really go down a rabbit hole at all.
Yeah.
We actually stayed on topic.
Pretty much, yeah.
We should probably take our temperature to see if we're okay.
Yeah, I mean, well, last week when we did, you know, the rumination thing, we stayed totally on topic. 2 in a row.
I don't know if I can handle that.
Yeah, so my commitment to our audience next week is we're going down a rabbit hole.
That's my assumption, actually.
Yeah. I don't know what the rabbit hole is, but we'll find one, I promise.
Well, then all we can do is invite people to come back next time. Thank you for being listeners. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.